My father immigrated here as a graduate student and generated over 65 U.S. patents. That's the immigration story we need to be telling. We can't always be focusing on some of the distressed stories.
And making it so that people are able to use our legal immigration system by reforming those laws.
I disagree that we should decriminalize our border.
Moderate Democrats pushing for merit-based immigration reform to solve the crisis at our southern border. So why can't Democrats get behind President Trump's proposals to do the same? He already has one lined up. Joining me now is Vice President for Foreign Policy at the Heritage Foundation, James Carafano. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
So let's begin with the president's plan for this merit-based immigration proposal. We can bring it up. It includes valuable skills, employment offers, advanced education, the plan to create jobs, and it specifically increases the proportion of highly skilled immigration immigrants, highly skilled immigrants, I should say, from 12% to 57%. So why can't these Democrats get on board with that?
Yeah, so first of all, we ought to make clear what we're talking about. So we currently bring in about 1 million immigrants each year. It's really about 10% of that we actually bring in to strengthen our economy and bring value. The other 90% are a whole bunch of other things. And so the president's plan would shift that, make about 60–70% people that actually would bring in and strengthen the economy. I've actually read the draft plan. It's a really solid plan, so it's a great question. You know, nobody has put a merit-based immigration plan. We've been debating immigration for 20 years. Nobody's put one on the table before the president. And what's interesting is you heard people tonight say, well, this is a good idea. But when the president unrolled this idea, the mainstream opposition in the Congress just said, well, this is ridiculous. We don't want to do this. It's just not fair.
Yeah, so several of the candidates last night were kind of trending that direction. Why can't they just go ahead and support the plan that the president has in place?
Well, you know, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, what the Democrats have, it's not a partisan comment, it's just a fact. What they've always done is for 15 years now, they've tied any immigration reform to amnesty. Well, the first thing we have to do is give amnesty to more of the illegal immigrants before we reform anything. But the problem is when you give amnesty, that just overwhelms the system. Look, we're probably going to bring in as many illegal immigrants this year as legal immigrants, right? And so it's just not compatible to say, well, let's reform the system. It's like saying, let's plug a hole in the boat. But then, you know, the wave of illegal immigration just swamps the boat, and they won't deal with the problem that their policies are tantamount to open borders.
Yeah, it was interesting that Vice President Biden last night, you know, he was hit with, would you have the same amount of people deported as what happened during the Obama administration, known as the deporter in chief? And he said, yeah, you know, you cross the border illegally, you should be subject to being sent back. So do you think he'll take a hit for that? Because it was quite different than everyone else on the stage.
You know, and again, you know, I do policy, not politics, but that is a minority view in his party. That is not what the mainstream argue. If you actually look at the policies that the Congress endorses, that virtually all the other candidates endorse, essentially, if you decriminalize, if you say we're not going to send people back, we're not going to spend money to build a wall, we're not going to screen out the 90% of the asylum seekers who have meritless claims, if you don't want to do any of that, essentially you're for open borders. And that's essentially the position that the mainstream opposition to the president has moved to. That's just a fact.
Yeah, explain to people, though, because we had Cory Booker specifically talking about decriminalizing the border. He said instead do it through the civil courts, meaning that you won't need these, quote, awful detention centers that he says that he's been to. How would that actually be open borders?
Yeah, well, look, here's the problem with that. If you don't actually detain someone, the odds of them actually being deported from the United States go to like 0. I mean, 90% of the people that have a final deportation order often don't show up for that. We have over 1 million people in the United States today who've exhausted who did everything Cory Booker said. They've exhausted every single legal mechanism. They have no legal right to be here, and we have 1 million of them here. So the notion that somehow people who just say, "Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I'll just leave now," that just the facts say that just doesn't happen.
Not realistic. All right, James Carafano, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. It's been a long 2 nights.
Thank you. No problem.